Good evening. I'm Crimson with Shine a Light in the Dark, and I am here with the wonderful Harold from Digith, and he is going to do us the honor of giving us a little moonlight for this evening. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you're currently working on and what we can currently expect from the band?
Yeah, to be precise, we're just in the middle of recording a new album. Our last album, Zero Hour in Doomtown, was released. What was it? October 22, and we did some excessive touring on that one. Even toured in the United States, which was in October last year. And just after Christmas, we sat down and started working on the next album because it's quite a process, to write and record an album. And nowadays, to get it out, to have it, physical printed on vinyl, and getting all the distribution and all the stuff that you need for modern day record making. So that takes a couple of months. So we started like, I don't know, I think it was the second week January, we started writing. We got a lot of ideas piled up that we had from sound checks and rehearsals, shifting through all that. And well, now for the last 2 weeks, we're actually in the recording process. We started recording drums, bass guitars, basic guitars, and yeah, we're in the middle of that. And hopefully, when everything goes according to plan, which it never does in rock and roll, by the way, but we try to. We hopefully will be done with the basic tracks within 2 weeks, I hope, and then we move on to the next phase. It's like getting the vocals done, putting the little extras on it, and if everything goes like we intend, we're probably done. Like early April, late April, hopefully, and we have to because. We start playing shows already last weekend of March, and then it's one big rush into May and June. We return to the United States. We play the Maryland Doom Fest. We will. So we're really looking forward to that. So yeah, it's a busy schedule. A lot of good things going on in the land of Digith.
No, that's awesome, and congratulations. And are there going to be new songs? Are you hoping to have some of the new songs on the tour? And like when you come to the United States playing like live?
Yeah, hopefully, we really would like to, have some new songs ready, for the upcoming tour. Probably will audition a couple of songs, because it's always a great thing, to play a couple of new things that keeps you motivated as well. On the other hand, you have to play also the older songs, and we're now 4 albums in. This will be our fifth album. So we get to that, difficult choice, what to play and what not to. There are certain songs that people really like, that we know that people appreciate, but also the songs that we like to play, stuff like, oh, that's really cool doing. So yeah, that's always a struggle. Okay, we got 40 minutes showtime. And we got 2 hours of songs that we want to play, so we have to pick stuff. So, but yeah, surely we're gonna play some new stuff as well.
No, that's awesome. And considering y'all just like have created the new album and that's recently in the works, but I kind of wanted to ask you, I believe like that music is its own entity, right? Like it never wants to misunderstand us. It wants to make us feel seen, heard, and understood. And I believe like that each musician is like a lighthouse that's kind of like shining its way back to for their listeners to stand back in their authenticity and in their true self.
Mm-hmm.
And, the musician does an amazing job at painting a world for the listener to go join them in. What kind of world did y'all always envision creating? And how does that world align with your first initial desire to create when y'all started versus now? And what are y'all
Mm-hmm.
still trying to create for your listeners?
That's an interesting question. Um, each and every album, is like this kind of time capsule, I would say. Like if I go back to the very first Digith album, I was a different person. I was a lot younger. and you have certain ideas that you want to, you know, um, bring to the table, or show to people. And every album is a different snapshot where you are in that timeline of your life. It also reflects different emotions, different phases that you're going through. You know, I remember when we did the first album, I was I was in the middle of a turbulent relation. I had a relation that ended, and a lot of the songs were, when I look back at it, that's always the funny part. When you look back at the music and the lyrics, and you go back to, where was I as a person, then all of a sudden it makes sense. You go like, oh yeah, now I understand why I wrote that kind of song or that kind of lyric. And sometimes you have to go back with your mind to relate to your own song, to the topic, to the notes you were playing, and go like, oh yeah, I was feeling that at the time. And the good thing about music is that, over time, sometimes the meaning changes. All of a sudden I have a different lookout on the lyric, or a different lookout on the music. It triggers a different emotion. And I think that's the great thing about music. In the past, I was always, like, trying to tell people, no, no, the song is about this and that, and I'm trying to say that. But over time, I felt like I don't have to do that at all, because when I play and sing something, it could mean a whole different thing to you, because it could be that you hear a completely different thing into it, and like that, and go like, oh no, this is my picture of the music, that of the world that you're showing to me, and that's totally fine. And I also have that with my own favorite music. If I sometimes read an interview with an artist and they explain what the song is about, or the feeling of the song, I go like, I had a completely different idea about that, and that's great. Just keep it that way. I mean, there's also a cultural difference. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between Europeans and people living in the United States, of course, but there's also a different approach in language, and that's all great. I think that's the cool thing about music. It connects people from different places all over the world, but it also shows the differences without that being a problem at all. It's just fun. Have your own interpretation of what somebody is doing, and that's how I look at all the different albums. Even the album that we released a year ago. We played the songs many times live, and all of a sudden, certain parts get a different feel to it, or a certain line you're singing, you go like, oh, I have a it brings up a different emotion, because you see the response from the people. The first time I wrote the music in my little room, and I wrote the lyrics and I was singing them, I didn't have that in mind when I was on the stage and look people in the eye, and all of a sudden they relate to a song, maybe in a different way that I intended it. So that's the beauty of the whole thing of making art, I guess. It's ever changing, it's ever growing, and it's got different meanings, different ways you appreciate it. So that's all cool.
Yeah, I really love how you mentioned that even to you as the artist, right, that you can see it at one time, and then later down the line, it can almost bring something different out, and even you. And I think that that's one of those beautiful things about art is that when the lyrics are just open enough to our own interpretation, to where we get that same core statements in there, but then it allows it to play just a little bit, to move into our life and become like in sync with it, right? Because I like, if you think about it, even music without lyrics or in a different language can transcend some of those feelings, and it can help us understand and relate to it. And then you get those ones that are so close to home that you're just like, damn, like I feel that. And then, so I have to ask you, like, when you were going like into even like your writing process now versus even then? Has that writing process changed? Because you said originally you didn't envision like seeing them sing it back to you, but then now you've had that experience several times. So
Right.
how has your writing process changed, and what does your writing process look like? Do you already kind of know what you want to sing, or does that just kind of come up?
That's also an interesting question. I was thinking about that. Some things don't change. It still starts um, with a melody, or a thing you have on your instrument. In my case, a guitar. And when I have a good idea, I always look for my cell phone. Oh, I have to record that, because the other day I'm always afraid that it's gone. But I noticed that the ideas that I really like, they stuck. I don't have to look them up on my cell phone. What were the chords like, what the melody like, because they're in here. And some stuff that I can't barely remember. Sometimes I look back at a little video I made, and it doesn't speak to me like it did when I recorded it. So that's already where I start to make my choices. Which is the stuff that sticks, that speaks. That when it's in your mind, I know I'm something. I'm onto something. And lyrics. That's an interesting thing, because of course we try to write in our best English, but it's not my native tongue. My first initial language is of course the Dutch language, and as I speak English, there's this little translation thing going on, in a split second. What's the right phrase? What's the right word? And I noticed that a lot of the stuff that I do, is based on how it sounds, and sometimes it can be a complete gibberish. When I look back at stuff that I make up, it's gibberish, but sometimes there's a line into it, or a word, or anything that makes sense, and go like, I think, it's telling me to go that direction or that direction. And what has changed when I look back, in the last 20 years, a lot of stuff, sometimes comes up when I'm driving my car, and I have this melody in my head, and it won't go, and I have to record it, just to, to clear my head, otherwise it's going on and going on, driving me crazy sometimes. But that's what I do a lot, that I write a lot more out of melody. I'm in a car, maybe stuck in a traffic jam, and then I get this idea and there's this melody, and I start singing it, and I start tapping on the steering wheel, and after half an hour, it's already into morphed into some kind of symphony. You go like, oh, you can do this and you can do that, and then I have to record it. I have to put it somewhere, because otherwise it's going on and going on. It's like this little mouse on the treadmill. It's going on and on. So that's a difference when I compare that to, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago, when I was a lot more guitar based. I had to get my guitar and write a riff and then get the idea for the melody. That's slowly changing around. The melodies pop up, and I noticed that the melody is the most important thing. All the other stuff, you can come up with, what this the melody that sticks. And I can tell that with my at home, with my wife, when I play something, and she goes like, "Oh, I had this melody you had. I had it in my head for entire day when I was at work." And I go like, "Okay, I'm onto something." So that's always interesting. And sometimes I write something which I think is great, and then it turns out to be not so great. And you have to be really careful about that, because when you go into the studio and with the modern recording techniques, you can, prop it up, to something that you think is good, but you have to be really critical. Does it does it stand on its own legs? If I grab an acoustic guitar and I play it, is it still a song? I think that's the most important thing. Is it a song? And does it mean anything? So yeah, that's how I try to do it.
No, I love what you were saying, especially the part where you were like, if I have to relook it up on my phone, I've almost realized that that's one of the ones that didn't stick with me. that didn't really make that impact, that was like, oh, this is one I've got to get out there. Or then you even hear your wife like kind of like, oh, I've had that in my head too, you know? Um, I really loved that. And, I kind of want to ask you, like, during that process, right? When we're talking about music, where do you actually find catharsis at? Is it when you're writing or when you're singing or when you're on tour or when you're just playing or when the album's finally released? Where does your cathartic moment happen for your music?
Um, well, that's interesting. There's not one specific moment. It can be a lot of moments that you just described, That can be late at night, working in the studio and having that feeling like, it's coming all together, That's how I started. The most vivid memory that I have of that moment that you described, is when I was probably 14 or maybe 15. I had this old 2-track recorder with the big reels onto it, and I could record 2 tracks with it, 2 guitar lines. And I remember the first time I recorded the guitar line and another one next to it. And, that was an amazing moment because that was the first time that I had an idea and I could actually record it. And I still can go back to that specific moment because that's sums it up for me. What does music do to me? What does it do in my body? I can still go back to that 14, 15-year-old Harold and relate to the feeling that he had on that moment. And I always try to get back, to that specific feeling. And that can be on tour, that somebody comes up. We played last year in the United States for the first time. And when people come up and they know your songs, or they go like, oh, that specific song or that specific album that brings back that feeling, you go like, wow, what a great thing that is to do, to create something, put it out, and there are people you never met, you never spoke to, who grew up in a totally different community or in another part of the world, but they can relate to that stuff that you do. And they also have that same kind of feeling. I guess it's the same kind of feeling that I had when I was maybe 14, 15. So in that whole process of writing, recording, going into stage, jumping into a car or even a plane, there are always those little moments where you have that feeling, And as long as I can relate to that 15-year-old me, then I think like that's for me the greatest thing. That's the most rewarding thing. I go like, at that specific moment, the world was okay. The world was all right. When I was 15, I didn't know what was coming my way on that highway of life, but I still can go back to that feeling that I was in perfect harmony. It's like, wow, if this is life, this is great. So I really try to go back to that moment, and I search for those moments.
That's beautiful. And I love how you said that, you still try to keep in touch with that part of you because I think that that's so important to keep that passion and that fire and that feeling alive because that's what music really is it's, there's an old saying that says that, the job of an artist is like that of a lover and to awaken the parts of you that you never knew existed and to show you a world that you've never known. And so it's always showing you these parts of yourself in different ways. And it's supposed to bring it back to that time, when we first experienced music and that feeling like that we first got, that sometimes gets lost in the heaviness of the world. You know, I like to kind of make a joke about being a therapist. That as a therapist, I'm bound by time and space, but as musicians, you're not. I get one person per hour, to make a difference in their life. But even as we're talking right now, somebody could be listening to one of your songs and having a full, group therapy session of just healing and just that feeling that you're talking about and just like experiencing that. So I guess kind of like on that throwback, kind of thought, I want to ask you at its core, what is music to you?
Um, Music is many things to me, but I think most important, maybe it's a kind of therapy. You just used the word therapy, it helps me with a lot of things, dealing with stuff in my life, the things I find difficult, but also the things I like, the stuff I love, giving, giving words to that, but it's also it's very much that mirror, like I said, the music is a time capsule, like I wrote a specific song in maybe 2014 or 2010, and it means a different thing today, but I still can relate to what I was feeling at the time. And it's also a bit of a learning experience, like you have certain things we all have to deal with things, we have to deal with loss, we have to deal with changes in our life, maybe a relationship ending or new one starting, and all that stuff, you have to process, and you have to deal with all that. And music definitely helps me, to, well, try to be a better person, and reflect on all the stuff that I do, also the bad things, also the bad stuff ends up in the music, you know, like about, decisions I made in my life, maybe where I wronged other people, and I I I tend to think a lot about things, and sometimes I think too much, and you can get really ill from that, if you overthink stuff. I'm the kind of person that sometimes, by the 10th time I have to say to myself, okay, now you thought about that whole problem 10 times, and still come to the same answer. Stop torturing yourself, and music helps me to end that torture. Sometimes I go like, okay, there's a lesson to be learned here, or this experience has done something to me. Let's try to capture that in notes and in words. And it's also like putting that in your personal library, like, okay, this was me in a good way or in a bad way, or whatever way, and I put it in my library. It's like a book, it goes into on the shelf, and I sometimes get that book and go through it and go, oh yeah, I remember that, and put it back again. But somehow it works for me like that. And music is also a thing. um it's a great connector, like us right now, here and now, within, what is it, 7 8 hour time difference, talking to each other, with uh, both a different cultural upbringing, but the music that does this, it's universal language. And I really like talking to all kinds of people from all over the world, and music helps, definitely helps to connect. All of a sudden, your views in life, maybe your political views in life, they don't matter that much at this very moment. We're talking about music, we're talking about stuff where we connect. And um, well, I'm not the kind of guy that thinks, okay, we're going to create a better world out of it, because you need a lot more to do it. But it definitely helps to connect to people, and which are maybe completely different than you are, and that's a great thing.
Like when you were talking about it, like the good parts and the bad parts, like even of your own learning experiences to put in your library. And I think that that's what I found that was very beautiful about your music was is that, somewhere along the lines, I think that we as humans began to think that that we labeled some things like the dark side of our human nature or the bad things, but really they were just learning experiences that I could learn and grow from. And I feel like with that vulnerability, like in music, it's almost like shining a light for your listeners, like opening up a path, like saying, hey, I've made some of these mistakes. Can you relate to me? Can you be human with me and see that number one, I've also made it to the other side because I've written about it now, so I've gotten a different take and a different experience on it. And so I guess kind of like, even when you're talking about like that first album, like with relationships, it's funny because like as we age, I think we even begin to like view relationships differently as we get older, right? Um, so I can imagine that that'd be a really cool thing to like go back and listen to your song and just see like kind of even how you view it differently than when you originally wrote it. And so I really do love that vulnerability and that authenticity that you bring into your music. And so I guess my next question for you too is, you know, what I know like for a lot of us and especially like a lot of like newer musicians when they're first starting, standing in on their vulnerability and being that raw in their music can be difficult for them. What really helped you bring the human to your music and really stay true to that?
Um, that's a good question. When I look back at all these years that I was playing music, I just, told you about that experience that I had when I was maybe 14 or 15, recording my music and having this purity, and having that sense of like, wow, I just created something. And I didn't think about, of course, I was eager for people to hear it, but I was in first place, I was really happy about myself. It's like wow, I created this. I didn't know it was there. And that was a great feeling for myself. My private moment. You go like, wow, great. And I noticed in all those years when I was also playing in other bands, you start to compromise because, and there's nothing wrong with compromising because you meet other people and you try to go from A to B and you have to, bring stuff to the table or take your ego a little bit back, which is all cool. But it gets ugly as soon as money gets involved or somebody says, oh, we have to pursue that goal. And I remember when I was really a young guy, I was in a band and, somebody said, we have to write a hit single and we have to do this and we have to do that. And you go into directions where when you look back at it, you go like, wow, why was I doing that? Because that's so far removed from that moment, where I started to enjoy, writing my own music. And with this band, I mean, we're, playing for many years now. But I had in my mind, it's good, when you play together with people, there's always compromise, and that's good. But don't give yourself away, stick to that stuff, that gives you your goosebumps, and of course, we do all kinds of stuff to promote it, bring it to other people, um, and you have to be ready to do that, and have to be involved, and you have to be have the right drive to do that. Um, but the important part is, are you having fun? Are you having a great time with your own creativity and your music and the stuff that you do? And what comes out of it, that's the second thing, how people are going to relate to it, how they're going to pick it up. Some things you cannot control, and that's okay. And don't worry about too much about that, and don't start to think too far ahead, because I think that takes you away from what you from 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 creating, from what art really is. We start to think in formats, and we go like, oh, it has to fit in that frame. um, and you have to keep the balance, and I think that's my learning experience from all the years and making music, being involved with art. There's this fine line, the balance, that tadpole you have to walk and make sure that you don't flip over to one side, and stick to the stuff that you like, put your heart into it, and see what comes out of it. That's the best advice I can give.
No, I really love that. And I have to ask because like now that you have been doing this so long, right, with this band, like, and I know, and I keep seeing your face light up when you talk about how proud you were for that first time, like when you were 14 or 15 years old, you know, and just how much you loved that. And I have to ask you, what would your 14-year-old version of yourself say if he could see you today? Like, how would he feel like just to
Wow.
know all you've done now?
Wow. That's a good question. That would be an interesting conversation. I would have a couple of advices for my 15-year-old self. That's for sure. Yeah, that's a good question. I think I remember when I was 14 or 15 and looked at people who are my age now. I always thought like, oh, I want to be a different person then. I want to still be, try to relate to the stuff that I do. And fortunately, I still can tell, I can also through music, but also the person I became, I still can relate with young people and I can relate to older people. My range of people that I know, maybe starts at people are maybe I've got a niece. He's like 8 years old, and I'm a favorite uncle. and I've got people who are up in their 70s or even 80s, that I talk to. So I really like the place where I am right now because you got that huge range of people that and that's interesting. Talking to an 80-year-old person or to an 8-year-old person is very interesting and also very inspiring. But looking back at the 15-year-old Harold, I hope that he is happy with the couple of choices I made, and maybe when he would walk into, I've got my own studio nowadays where I do my recordings. I hope he would be happy and go like, "Oh man, you started with that reel-to-reel recorder back then, and this is the stuff that you have now. Wow!" I hope that he looks on it like that. But I can only look back, on the stuff that I did, and I still can relate to that guy, working with that old tape recorder and putting his ideas on it, and nothing hasn't changed too drastically, to be honest. I'm still doing that using different techniques nowadays, but it's still the same thing. Actually, just a couple of hours ago, I recorded some guitar parts, and I sometimes it gels. You go like, yeah, and I go like, that's that 15-year-old me. That's for sure.
No, I love that because I was thinking about that. You totally hit on it about like how that he started like this and like now just like look at like now look how we're doing it and like and I think that the kind of cool thing is like when those moments happen like in that time we don't realize how defining they are or how like much they're going to become like a part of that story and a part of that feeling and a part of that like aliveness. And I know that you mentioned like when you were 14 or 15, that's when you finally did that first recording. But what about even younger Harold? When did he first realize he wanted to be a musician and that that was the kind of artistry he wanted to use to tell the story of his soul with?
Yeah, I can't tell the exact moment, where I wanted to be an artist. I'm not even sure that I wanted to be an artist or did I have an idea what that really meant. I knew at a young age that I want to be creative. That's one thing for sure, because I always liked it, like when I was a lot younger, I liked to draw a lot. I still have my drawings from when I was, maybe like 6 or 7 years old. And I see a lot of it in those drawings. But like, wow, you were a busy kid. You had a lot of ideas. But one of the moments I really, really remember, I was probably maybe 5 or 6 years old, and I had this older nephew, which differed in over 15 years with me, and he was playing all that cool music from the 70s. He had records from ranging from Jimi Hendrix to Uriah Heep and a lot of the 70s music. And I remember sitting as a 6-year-old kid in his bedroom. And of course, he liked that having that little nephew in his room. And I was sitting on his bed, and I remember that that's still the view I have, that my feet couldn't touch the floor, because I was sitting on the bed and it was just a little guy and my feet did not touch the floor. And he was playing all that music and certain music and records. I mean, even at that age, they travel into your brain, and there's this giant library of songs up here. It's amazing. Sometimes you hear a song and with a split second, oh, I didn't hear that in 20 years, but I still know the song. That's the magical thing of the human brain. That's so crazy, And that moment, I that was probably the moment I look back at it where music started really have to mean something to me, even at that young age. But I remember that, because my nephew, 15 years older, he was a big guy with long curly hair, and that was just magic. He was living in had this room in a kind of attic kind of vibe to it, and I still have that view is still in my head. I can relate to that, even if when it's so long ago. But that was definitely the moment when I look back at it, something was awakened for sure, and that wasn't not the specific moment where I thought like, oh, I'm gonna try to be an artist, whatever. That maybe was a lot later along the line, but that was definitely one of those moments that that was the fire was lit at that very moment.
I really love how you mentioned that because I like the way you described it too. Like I could totally like see your feet just like kind of like dangling, just like I love how music can bring back that memory. And I think what I loved the most is you talked about the magic. Is I think that somewhere along the lines, as we get older, magic gets lost. But I think that music is really one of those things that reignites the magic in us because it is something that still holds a world of magic to it. And it can speak to us in ways that we haven't been spoken to. It can make us feel things that we didn't know we could feel. You know, my daughter sometimes has problems expressing herself emotionally. So what she'll do is she'll find a song and she'll come to me, and she's a 16-year-old girl, so I'll give her some grace there. But she'll come to me and be like, "Look, Mom, this is the song. This is how I feel." You know, and that will be her way of telling me what's going on because before she heard that song, she couldn't even articulate to me what was really it just felt like she'll be like, it just feels like all madness in here, Mom, like all madness. And then that song will come on and it'll make it all make sense. Almost like the magic wand just got waved and like, oh, this is what I've been feeling. This is that emotion that I've been trying to feel, you know? And with how vividly you were explaining that, I'm wondering, like, are there any artists like that for you that really to this day, like, really helped you learn about yourself and about kind of even your journey in life that you feel like you still like can go back to those moments and feel?
Hmm. Well, before I answer that, I just want to tell you, how great is that, when you have your daughter coming up to and go like, hey, explaining by a song how she feels about certain things, like that's such a great thing when you think about it, that because communication at that age, telling what troubling you, that's always difficult. I remember at that age, I really found it difficult, or even I was shy, and talking about stuff even with your parents, and that you in your life at this moment, have your daughter and you can do that and relate to each other through a song. That's great. That's great. That helps, to connect those worlds, so that's really awesome. Really awesome to hear that.
You know what's funny
And
about it? Oh, I'm sorry.
continue.
Oh, I was gonna say what's funny about it is that one of the things that she likes to say is she's like, see, since she doesn't like to be vulnerable, she's like, since the artist was vulnerable, I didn't have to be. And so it even gets her out of her like little 16-year-old ego because she was still tough. She didn't technically express all of these like feelings that make her want to fumble and, curl into a little ball. The artist did it for her, where she was actually, and so I always thought that that was really cool when she said that is it almost even took away like the ego part that's like it made me feel too vulnerable to express and then it also helped it make sense.
Yeah. great. I mean, to get back to your initial question, which artists, maybe, I could relate to. Um, there's so many, living, growing up in the Netherlands like I did, of course you get your native language, and even the regional dialect and stuff like that. I remember when I was a kid, there were bands who were singing in the regional dialect, and that was the first thing when I was a kid I could relate to. They sang something I understood. And I remember hearing the first time in my life the band Status Quo. And I didn't understand English at that age. And I was listening to that and I thought they were singing a different regional dialect, So I made my own words along with the song and the meaning, we're singing about. So the funny part is when I hear some songs on the radio now, so many years later, I still I still tend to want to sing those lyrics that I made up, and the meaning which they had, which is more a funny part. But that's how it works when you're younger. But the thing that really comes to mind is maybe a different answer than you might expect. I had a kid living next door to me when I was relating to that when I was 14, 15 years old. I had this neighbor kid, and he was a couple of years ahead of me, and I always saw him walking across the street. He was a tall guy, and he was wearing this long coat, and he always had a guitar in his right hand. And at some moment, I had the guts to come up to him and go like, "Hey, man, I see you walking with that guitar, and um, I want to play an instrument as well." And he invited me in, and I remember he taught me the first couple of chords on a guitar. And he was a really talented young man. I think I was back then I was 13 and he was maybe 15. And he was playing guitar and he taught me the first couple of chords, and I held down those chords, and he went behind the piano and started to play on the piano, and he went like, "Oh, if you hold on to those chords, then a counter melody can be this, and the singing could be that." And then with his feet, he's starting to play the bass, and all of a sudden, there was music in the room, and that was for me. He was for me like he was like my hero. It was going like, wow, that's coming out all out of you, and you have all these ideas. And he was also a painter. I remember one day I came to his place, for another guitar lesson, and he was making a painting. And at that moment, I didn't find that weird or strange or whatever. He was making a painting, and he was painting something. And now when I look back at it, I go like, wow, how many 15-year-olds nowadays are into painting and playing music? I still hope a lot of them. But now I realize so many years later how special that was, and meeting that guy. And that's one of my most profound memories, like that whole, I saw him, do stuff, and he was so crazily talented. Um, I had to really work hard, to get my chops, and I still have to, I have to practice, I have to do stuff. It's not coming like that. But with him, there was a gift. He was gifted. Everything that he did turned into art, and that's what really, if I have to look back at a musician, he was really the guy that inspired me. It's going like I started to work harder and harder, to get to that level, and that's an amazing thing, meeting people along the way in your life that have such an impact, on even the stuff that I do, so many years later. I mean, he's not alive anymore, unfortunately. We lost him a couple of years ago, but the impact he made on my life and me as a writer, and the way I look at music, at melody, at harmony, and all this stuff that make up music, that's so profound and lasting.
First off, I'm so sorry for your loss, and thank you so much for sharing those beautiful memories. Because you kind of, and you kind of answered it when you talked about his loss, but I'm assuming like, so were you able to see him like all the like after like I know you saw him as a kid, but did you have some kind of relationship with him like in your adulthood too, to where he
Yes. We stayed friends for until the end, and he was really a shy guy, not a guy who wanted to be in the limelight. I mean, he played in bands, he did his thing, and but he was more. He was always up to something, creating something, but he wasn't concerned about being in the limelight or having a professional career. Nothing of that at all. He was just about creating. Everything he did, was done with an artistic view. As soon as you entered his house, you already, were in some kind of dream world. Everything he did with furniture and everything, there was always this little touch to it. And meeting those kind of people in my life is very important, because it always puts me back with my feet on the floor. It's not about being up there in the limelight and selling your product. It's about creating. That's the most important part. And you have to be try to be true to yourself. And there's always a business part to music. A lot of musicians who made it are maybe not um, the greatest artist, but they clever businessman as well. That's how it works. And sometimes those two um, go together. And but meeting a guy like him, being so pure about his art and not having a giant ego or whatever, that really helps me, to stay humble, and be happy with what you do, because you got this life, and make the best out of it, and try to keep that creative self alive, not get stuck with doing all kinds of stuff that you have to do in your life, but keep that part of you alive, Dave. That's very important to me. That's the lesson I learned from it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that it's so important that we keep that creative part of us alive. You know, it's part of what keeps, I feel like that fire in us alive. And I love how you were mentioning like how he loved the pureness to art because we don't even think about it, but like almost, I think that artists spend more time creating than they realize because they're really creating like little pieces of everything. And they don't even realize it down to their conversation styles to anything. Like they're creating these worlds, for, like your home almost is this world that you create for people to come into and visit you, you know, and they are coming like in your world or through your music. And I think that a lot of artists go through life like with that creation and a part of it gets lost, but it's like that. But I love how you keep talking about that part of it and that magic of it because at its core, I really believe that music is kind of that thing that is just at its pure source, like a hope, right? Like a hope, a magic, a beauty that was once seen but long forgotten, a feeling that was once felt, something to be nourished and taken care of, and just like this beautiful thing. Um, So I really love that, and I really appreciate you sharing your story about him. And again, I am so sorry for your loss because it sounds like y'all were really close and that he made a huge impact on you, not only as a musician, but as a man and in your life. I'm very
Yeah,
sorry for that.
yeah. We lost him too early. That's one thing for sure. But on the other hand, I'm very grateful for what we had, and I still can go back to that. I mean, loss in life, it's part of it, part of our lives, and you have to deal with that. But I learned through the years, to be really grateful for what you had. You always want more. That's a normal human thing, and you want to keep everything you love, the people you love, even your favorite pet, you want to keep them, you want to all turn 80 together, but it's not going to work like that. It's not like that in life, and you have to accept that. But you have to look back at the good things that you had, the stuff that gave you those memories and that energy, and you can still tap into that. It's all up here. You can go back in time and go like, oh man, that was when I felt really good, or had a good experience, or do you remember that? That's great having that, and it's also kind of an art not to be sad about it. Yeah, of course, I'm sad about it at certain times, but it's also celebrated. You had these moments that were so defining, and go back to that and maybe capture that in a song, or talk about it like we now do, and inspire each other about that. Um, I think you have to try to look at it like that, and that helps. Surely helps.
No, I completely agree. And it sounds like y'all have made amazing, like many amazing memories together. And I love what you were talking about too about the good parts of it, because I feel like in those ways that they're not really gone, right? Because a part of those memories and a part of the musical gift and a part of those things that he gave you is still living on through you and your musical career, and you know and in your life, the way that you remember him and in those ways. And
Yeah,
I completely couldn't agree more that those are, while as loss is sad and it can be hard, it's also just as important to remember the beauty that came from that, so that the loss doesn't outweigh or overpower what was beautiful from those connections and those relationships that brought so much magic into our world.
right. Yeah,
Um, I want to make sure I honor your time. So I want to make sure we have just a few moments too to talk about, the album and like what you're currently like um fixing to release, because we're hoping to get that out here pretty soon.
cool.
Um, so I want to make sure, what are you kind of allowed to tell us a little bit about what's coming up, or are we not really releasing too much information on that yet?
Um, no, I can tell you what I can so far, because like I mentioned earlier, we're still in those early stages, of recording. Of course, we had the writing process, which is also a thing in itself. But yeah, we got I think about 10 or 11 new songs ready, and they're a different chapter in in the big book of Digith, in the big library, and I really like the songwriting, for this upcoming album. Hopefully out by the end of the year. I hope so. That also has to do with, are we gonna meet our schedules, to get it out. It has to be done, around May, something like that, latest. So we have to work hard to get that done. But what I really like about this album and the music is the vibe that we have with the three of us together. On the previous album, our bass player, Natasha, she came in like when we were already like two-third in creating that album. So we had to adapt. All of a sudden, we had a different lineup. We're just a three-piece band, with drums, bass, guitar, and and vocals, of course. Uh, but a three-piece band, when you take a piece out and you put another piece in, that's a huge thing. That's a major thing. So when she came in, she brought a lot of new things, and we had to digest that really quickly to get the previous album done. So um, we did it, but I remember it was really, really stressful, because we were like, oh, we were running out of time, and we go like, oh, how are we going to do all that? So that's that's the memory that sticks to that album for me. Like, oh, it was almost like having a heart attack every day. Like, how are we going to do all that? And with this album, it's completely the opposite. We toured together, we played together, and we have extremely much fun together. Like doing that trip to the United States, that was classic. We still relate to that, tell stories, and have a lot of fun. And fun is the main thing I would say for this album. It's all going so smooth. I sometimes have to pinch myself because when we said last year, like, we got this time frame, January to late March, to write and record the album in between all our daily stuff, and we have to play shows again by the end of the March, and then it's one, until June we got shows booked. I was going like, how am I gonna do all that? And now we're in the middle of it, and it's going so smooth. I go like, wow, what has happened? But then you see what touring together, playing together, being creative together, and having the right vibe, having the right people, having the right mindset. Um, you can move mountains with that. It's amazing. So we have so much fun, and it goes so quickly. Unbelievable. We're already 2/3 into the whole recording process. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the end result of this album. It's always, I can't exactly tell how it's going to be, but from the vibe of it, I go like, wow, this is going to be a great album. The vibe is just great, and that helps a lot. You get that. Every album, every chapter has its own process, and sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's more difficult, and you remember certain albums and certain songs for you know different challenges or experiences. But this one so far, it's great, and you can tell the mileage that we have from doing so much shows together. Like last year, we've been all over the place, playing a show in the Czech Republic, playing shows in the United States, and all combining that with our private lives. I'm really proud of where we are now today, and the band that we have. And our current bass player Natasha, she brought a lot, for Casper and me, Casper the drummer, and me as a guitarist and singer. She brought really a great dynamic to the band, and a lot of fun. And we're all very grounded. We know what we want, we know what we do, and it's really great to work on this album. So I can't wait for you to hear it, but that will be still a couple of months away. But yeah, it's great.
No, I'm super stoked about it. I'm super excited to hear it. I'm super excited about how you said that this is going for you. And I thought it was really kind of cool how you were like, I feel like I gotta pinch myself to like because the process is going smooth. So
Yeah.
I'm so happy for that for you. And I'm also so living for y'all coming to tour in the US. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yep.
Um, before I let you go though, is there anything else that you want to let the audience know?
Well, again, like I said earlier, I'm really grateful for for talking to you. Even there's a, a huge time gap between our lives, but I think that's really great. I'm really happy that nowadays with the internet we can do stuff like this. So it's so amazing, and it's so rewarding talking to people like you, but also fans from around the globe, that discover our music through internet, or even have the physical albums. When we played the United States last time, people come up to you with their vinyl and they want you to sign it, and that's that means a lot. That's a huge thing. That's really a huge thing, that you go like, wow, the stuff that I wrote, people can relate to that. So I'm really grateful for that, and I really appreciate it that people like you keep it alive. In these days, there's so much stuff you can choose from, but keeping that music alive, supporting bands like ours, that means a lot. That means a lot to us, like for being an artist. So thank you very much for that, and to all the fans in the greatest state of Texas in the United States. Check out Digith if you want, and hopefully see you somewhere along the road in 24, 25.
Yes, no, it has been an absolute honor talking to you tonight, and I truly appreciate you. And thank you so much for coming on. And thank you for all the vulnerability with your answers and just all of it. Like you are a rock star, and it was truly an honor. to speak with you. And guys, please remember, I will leave all the links down below. Please check them out. Send them lots of love, send them lots of light, and remember to share music because that's what keeps fans alive.